Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to dish up some movie news and review a film, either current or classic. As the current films this week are not maybe so great, we decided to settle on something classic that is also in theaters right now. We're going to be reviewing the new 4K restoration of Close Encounters of the Third Kind on this week's episode of the Movie Bears podcast. So if you've seen that movie, awesome. Maybe you've had a chance to see it in theaters. Maybe not. Maybe you're resting on the laurels of nostalgia. Either way, we're going to be talking about all things Close Encounters. We're also going to be serving up some movie news, some news items that have piqued our interest. But before I do that, before I open those cans of worms, let me introduce you to two guys I literally could not do this show without. Two of my favorite people on the face of the whole planet, who, if I was sucked up by an alien spaceship, I would want to accompany me into outer space. Jim Poliafco, welcome to the show.
Hi, babe. And for everybody else out there, hello, my name is Jim. Hello.
Nice. And
Will, my name is Jim.
And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Thank you for that, Brad. Jim, thank you for the tonally pertinent intro. I like that. I like that a lot.
Hashtag tonally pertinent. I like that too. So we've got a fun show coming at you guys this week. I mentioned we're going to be reviewing Close Encounters, and we're going to be talking about that pretty full of spoilers. So if you haven't seen Close Encounters yet, bear that in mind. Although the movie is 40 years old, so chances are pretty good if you're going to see the movie, you probably have seen it already. Before we do that, though, guys, how do you feel about diving into some movie news?
Yeah, we got some things to talk about.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, then here we go. Some movie news. All right, so Jim, why don't you go ahead and kick us off this week? What's something going on in the film industry right now that's maybe perked your interest a little bit?
Well, I don't know my interest, but I think it would be of interest to a lot of people. And that's not to say I'm not interested and I didn't take note of this, but the big news that broke today actually was that Disney and Lucasfilm have made an announcement today that the director of Star Wars Episode 9, who was Colin Trevorrow, will no longer be directing Star Wars Episode 9. He's been involved in the film since kind of the beginning, and the story's been developing. I mean, the Star Wars has been developing, but he's out as director. Right now, Star Wars Episode 9 does not have a director. We might get an announcement soon, but as of right now, he's out. Let me read a little blurb from, this is taken from the StarWars.com website. I think the official website of Star Wars. Lucasfilm and Colin Trevorrow have mutually chosen to part ways on Star Wars Episode 9. Colin has been a wonderful collaborator through the development process, but we have all come to the conclusion that our visions for the project differ. We wish Colin the best, and we'll be sharing more information about the film soon. So there you go. That's the short and sweet version of, getting let go from a major motion picture. So this was kind of, I think, a surprise to most people. I won't say a total blindside. There was some things leading up to this movie that made some noise, but we kind of thought that had settled down a little bit. I guess so. Colin Trevorrow was the director of a small indie movie that came out and made a big splash in the sci-fi world called Safety Not Guaranteed, which I think we all liked. I remember the first time we saw that movie. It was around the time we started this podcast, I think, several years back, 5, maybe 6 years ago. We all liked that movie. And then all of a sudden, Colin Trevorrow is directing movies like Jurassic World. He was a director of Jurassic World, which, we can argue about how great or not that movie was, but it was very well received in most corners. It did very successfully. It was very successful at the box office. Pretty entertaining movie. We had our nits and lice to pick with it, but overall we felt it was pretty good, and therefore Lucasfilm and Disney decided to put Colin Trevorrow on Star Wars Episode 9. But then somewhere along the line, Colin Trevorrow last year or earlier this year put out a movie called The Book of Henry, which really, really bombed. It was like a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it made a lot of people, especially fans of Star Wars, who knew that he was, because eyes were on him, right? What's he going to do leading up to Star Wars? And he lays this bomb out there, which had a lot of issues. Not to mention it, it wasn't well reviewed. It didn't do well at the box office, and it had some questionable ethical issues in the movie as well. So after that, fans were calling for him to be let go from the movie. He wasn't right away, but apparently he, this has caught up with him. Maybe this has caught up with him, or something else was going on, and he's now gone from the movie. So I don't know. What do you guys think about this news?
Well, this isn't the first time in recent history even that Disney/Lucasfilm has parted ways with the director. We had almost the exact same mutually chosen because of a difference of opinions. We wish him the best. We had that exact same statement, but with Phil Lord and Chris Miller's names inserted in for the film Han Solo.
Right.
And so I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that when you're dealing with a property that has a sort of a high ceiling and with a large, like in this case, we're talking about a multi-film arc, right? You've got to make sure that the right person is attached to it to get the right tone and to develop to deliver the story the way you want it to on screen. And Colin Trevorrow could be the best director in the world. I don't think he is, but he could be. And if he didn't line up with kind of what the direction for that script needed, maybe it's better to replace him. I think what's going to be just as interesting is, for me, seeing who does step in the replacement spot. We saw Ron Howard step in to replace the Lord and Miller spot on Han Solo. We also have back in, I want to say July, we have a tweet from Ryan Johnson, who had just recently wrapped episode 8 at that point. And he was like, this was the most fun I've ever had directing a film. I would love to do another one. So it's possible. Maybe they're happy with him and they bring him back for episode 9. Depending on if 8's good, that would be great to have the same director kind of carrying from those two films together. So I'm not worried about this news. While I was definitely good with giving him a good shot, I'd been a little turned off by him after Jurassic World and was not. He was, of the different directors that were attached in different spots, he was probably the one that inspired enthusiasm out of me the least. So let's see where we go from here.
Well, and it's an interesting line for a director to try and walk too, because a director comes in, they maybe have their own vision, their own ideas, they want to put their own spin on the Star Wars universe, right? Disney is expecting them to play ball a certain way, I'm sure, right? There's probably some imperial shackles that come with directing these movies because they are part of this new trilogy. Tonally, they do need to fit together. And so, I can't speak for Colin Trevorrow, but I mean, I don't know. There were some things with Jurassic World that made the studio a little bit unhappy, and he had to be reined in a little bit, reportedly. So, I don't know if some of that maybe reared its head with Disney and Star Wars. It's hard to say, but, I don't know. Maybe we're going to get a better film as a result. We'll have to see. Of course, we haven't even seen episode 8 yet. So, it's difficult to say, but at this point, I will say after The Force Awakens and Rogue One, I mean, I trust Disney at this point with Star Wars. They have proven their Star Wars hyperspace lane street cred. So I'm going to say it's maybe it's a good thing. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems to me Trevorrow was brought in not just as director, but as writer for the Star Wars Episode 9. Is that is that typical for the Star Wars movies? They always writer directors, or do they ever split up the responsibilities to some degree?
This is, I mean, we're kind of in new territory because with the first episode, the first 6 episodes were very heavily influenced by George Lucas.
Right.
Even if he wasn't directing them, like he was the kind of the man behind the bulk of the story, or at least the especially in the prequel trilogies. Like he was, he had his thumbs all over that. So we're in new territory, kind of in the Force Awakens and on era of Star Wars.
Indeed.
In the chat, our friend Sammy W says, "Please hire George Miller." The more I think of that, the more it sounds awesome. Although I don't know if they would get George Miller to bite on something like that. George Miller is, of course, the director of Mad Max and the Mad Max movies, and most lately Mad Max Fury Road, which I think he's announced he's going to be doing another movie of. So
nice.
Yeah, the Furiosa movie, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
My dream cast for this one is Ryan Coogler, actually. If it's not going to be like Ron Howard or Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams, someone who's already put out one of these films or is putting out one of those films. Ryan Coogler, he's the dude that did Fruitvale Station and Creed. And he's doing Black Panther for Marvel coming up soon. So I think he's already part of that Disney-verse. I think that he would be he's that great, like that nice, perfect line of director of someone who can, like, and we saw this with Creed. He's able to play within the rules of someone else's universe without disrupting things, while also still kind of moving stories forward. So I'd be down for a Coogler Star Wars.
Interesting.
Yeah, that could be a good fit, and I'm sure we could probably come up with a whole list of potential directors and why. And there's probably some really good ones out there that would really fit. Heck, tear Patty Jenkins away from Marvel movie, from Wonder Woman, and make her do a Star Wars.
So here's what we'll do. First things first. Hey, Sam, good to hear from you. Second, Sam is actually going to be here staying with us this weekend in about 36 hours. So, Jim, you and Sam should sit down and put together your dream team list of directors for the next Star Wars movie. Will, you put together your list, and then you guys can compare and see where the overlap is.
There's probably a betting line forming right now about with odds of who's going to end up directing it.
This is Star Wars news. I haven't looked yet, but there are probably 87 think pieces on these topics that hit today. Like that's that's the easy gambling odds. People have already ejaculated their opinions all over the web on this.
I gotta say that if you're a director and you take one of these movies on early on in the process, do you have to put yourself in the mindset that hey, I may take this thing on and there's only a 75 to 80% chance that I'll end up actually taking this movie to the goal line. You know what I mean? Either what I'm doing won't be a fit for them, or they'll piss me off and I'll leave. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not a sure thing anymore.
I know. Well, we'll have to see what happens. Definitely. Will, what have you got this week?
So I'm breaking the rule a little bit here, and I'm going to talk about a television show in our movie news section. But the television show is True Detective, the really gritty detective series from HBO. And as far as TV series goes, those seasons are about as cinematic as you can possibly get. So I think it counts. The main bit of news here is... or the new piece of news is that we now have a director for this new season. Each season is its own anthology. It's its own thing separate from the other seasons. And they've tapped Jeremy Saulnier, one of my absolute favorite working directors these days, in that spot. So we've got, this is the guy that gave us Blue Ruin, that gave us Green Room. He's got a movie coming out called Hold the Dark next year. I'm excited about that one. But I'm excited to see what he does with the series, especially with the lead that's been announced. It looks like Mahershala Ali, you know, the guy from Moonlight who just took that Oscar a few months ago. He's set to be the lead in this new anthology series, or this new season directed by Saulnier. We do have a premise for the season, although it's very, very light at this point. This is what we've got. It's the story of a macabre crime in the heart of the Ozarks and a mystery that deepens over decades and plays out in 3 separate time periods. Ali will play the lead role of Wayne Hayes, a state police detective from Northwest Arkansas. And that's what we know. We also know that he has he's going to be co-directing this with Nick Pizzolatto. That's the guy that created True Detective, so they're going to be sort of sharing the director's seat. I think that's a really cool thing. I like Ali. I like Saulnier. I like the fact that the creator of the show is still having kind of the co-director's chair, so that you can keep that consistency while also allowing this other voice in. I'm all in on this. How do you guys feel?
Man, we after absolutely loving season 1 of True Detective, season 2 was kind of it was, I think, a letdown for a lot of people. That's not to say necessarily it was horrible or it was bad, but I think it had a lot to live up to with that first season, and I think it fell short in many ways. So the series could use, you know, and they are changing directors, but the series could use a reinvigoration, right? And it's tough right now. There's a lot of great TV out there. So is True Detective going to be able to, you know, jump back toward the top of the pile with, you know, by the time this, I don't know when this is coming out, but, you know, then the last season of Game of Thrones and Twin Peaks and, you know, all the stuff that's getting a lot of buzz these days. But yeah, I'd like to see. I do want. Is this going to be Jeremy Saulnier's next new thing, or has he got a movie before this? Because I've wanted to see his next new thing. I loved Blue Ruin a lot. I know you loved Green Room a lot. I thought it was good, but I wanted to see him take a step with his next project.
Well, his next project is actually in post-production. It's Hold the Dark, and it's this film based on a book about this wolf hunter kind of in the Alaskan wilderness, like looking for this kid. It's gonna have like Riley Keough in it and Alexander Skarsgård. It's close to coming out, i.e. like it's very possible if things cut a particular way that we might be seeing it in a couple weeks. But if not, it'll be a 2018 release.
Cool. So we'll be looking for that one for sure. Maybe in a couple weeks. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a long shot at this point, but it's like it's still on the table based on where it's at in production.
Cool. All righty.
Interesting. I was not a fan of season 2 of True Detective at all. I wasn't even that big of a fan of season 1. I know a lot of people think it was amazing. I love that you loved it as much as you did, but I don't know. This doesn't really excite me that much. But maybe it'll be good. I will say, after seeing Ali on Luke Cage, I really, really loved him in Luke Cage, and of course Moonlight. That's probably the big attractant for me there. So I'll definitely give it a view. But if all it is mumbling and smoking the whole time, again and again, I'm probably out.
Yeah. Oh boy.
All right. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. Hey, is it also cheating if I have a Star Wars news bit?
No, I mean, it's Star Wars news is like I feel like when there's a week or two that goes by where there isn't some sort of leak or news or announcement, the Lucas/Disney team is kind of like their PR team is dropping the ball. So no, go for it.
Well, once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, there were a series of Star Wars books that continued the story after Return of the Jedi. This was before we ever found out that George Lucas was going to do a prequel series, or that there would be, a third trilogy set after Return of the Jedi. So these books sort of carried the stories forward. And there was a trilogy of books, the Heir to the Empire trilogy, that came out by a writer named Timothy Zahn. And I won't bore you guys with all the details, but there was an evil clone of Luke Skywalker, you guys, that was cooked up by this, like, evil Jedi. He wasn't really a Sith. I don't even know what you call him. But in any event, it's relevant because Mark Hamill recently gave an interview to Empire magazine all about Star Wars: The Last Jedi, and they were talking to him about sort of some of the controversy around some of the disagreements he had with the director and the take that they were going with Luke Skywalker for this movie. And I guess one of the things that he said in the interview is he really wanted to play the evil clone version of Luke in the new movies, and that he didn't want anyone, to realize it was the evil clone of Luke until like the end of the trilogy or something. Then you find out, hey, this guy that's doing all this crazy shit isn't Luke Skywalker after all. So I gotta say, that has me a little bit worried in a way, because, if he's given interviews where it almost sounds like he's trying to like offer up an excuse for why Luke is the way he is in these new movies. So that has me a little bit potentially worried about what they're doing with Luke's character. Certainly the title of this new movie, The Last Jedi, his tagline in the film, it's time for the Jedi to end. It also seems like in the trailer, this notion of like the good side of the Force and the bad side of the Force maybe is going out the window, and they're going with the whole balanced Force thing. I don't know. Apparently Disney shut him down hard, and they were like, Disney and Lucasfilm were like, nope, evil clones have been done to death. We're not going to do it. Sorry about your luck. But it's interesting that he's doling out this information in an interview. What purpose would that serve, really? Do you think it's just, hey, here's something interesting, or is there maybe a reason behind it?
I think it's just something interesting, mainly because of the source. Mark Hamill is one of those, of the different people that are kind of connected to like sci-fi fandoms. He's one of the ones that I think is most appreciative of some of the quirk and weirdness that goes on there, and has his fingers a little more on the pulse of what happens. I mean, I know there's plenty of actors that star in a giant science fiction thing, show up to a con once or twice, but don't really know much about like, oh, did my character do that? Oh, I guess that happened. I think Mark Hamill in this case, and I don't know, I'm not his brain, I don't know. But I think he was playing with the concept of people are going to be really excited about the film, and they're going to run with stuff. They're going to take everything and kind of have some fun with it. And he knows this kind of weird trivia from this, the now non-canonical books. I am with you. If it does end up being true, I'm tapping out. I don't want to see evil clones. Like I don't see that does not sound like the type of story arc that fits where this story has gone or where it's going. No offense meant towards the books or its fans. I just think that particular storyline should stay in the realm of fan fiction.
Yeah, I mean, like, fuck evil clones. I mean, seriously, like, you're right, Brad. It's been done to death. It's an easy cop out to make a story. Just invent another character who's, I don't know. I'm not super excited about an evil clone either. It sounds to me like maybe, Brad, you were hinting at maybe he's trying to throw seeds of doubt into the character that he's playing in episode 8. Oh my God, maybe at the end of the movie, it's going to be a big twist. And he's going to say that he killed Luke or he's got him in prison somewhere. And this is I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I'm excited for episode 8. I'm excited to see what they do in this movie. I really am excited for it. Mostly because I'm looking to see how they fill out more of it's Rey, right? Is that her name? Fill out more of her arc. I want to see more of Kylo Ren. Yeah, I want to see more of these new characters that they introduced in the last movie, episode 7. So I'm excited, but I'll take it with a very big grain of salt, what he said.
All right. Well, for the definitive word, let's turn to the one person who knows Luke Skywalker best. Hey, R2, would an evil clone Luke be a good idea? Well, there you have it.
R2, wash your damn mouth out. It's disgusting.
I know.
Okay, wow. I stand corrected.
Brad,
he had to roll into the other room. That got him a little upset, guys.
Yeah, Brad, don't do too much of that. Lucasfilm is going to sue our asses off, I think.
Wait, Disney's litigious. Nah.
They'll come after us in our stacks of gold.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, all the stacks of gold that we, of course, do not have.
We've got a Scrooge McDuck bank like right over there.
Let's all go swimming. Let's go skinny dipping in our money. What do you guys think?
That's what I do every night. Yeah, let's make it happen.
Oh, goodness. Well, hey, speaking of raking in the dough, how do you guys feel about talking a movie that's only been re-released like 50 times to bring in more money and more dough?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, Brett, actually, what would you do if like Jim and I were both like, nope, we've decided nope?
You know, I would transition right into plugs. I'd be like, all right, short show tonight. We don't have to go hungry for another hour. Let's end it.
We wouldn't do that. But I just thought like, oh no, that would be weird.
Let's not do that movie.
I love that. That's our like eject button jingle. Like
well, we're going to be talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, currently in theaters for its 4K restoration, celebrating the 40th anniversary of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Typically, we do a non-spoiler section and then give you fair warning before we delve into spoilers. But the movie's been out for 40 years. So, Jim, Will, are we in agreement we probably don't need to do a non-spoiler section at this point?
I think people have either seen this. People have had 40 years to see this movie, and I think that it would just be us playing too coy if we tried to do a spoiler section for it.
Yeah, I think I think it would lend itself best to a good discussion if we just were able to discuss the movie in its entirety and not dance around any particular plot points that are in this movie or big things that happen. Because you're right. I think a lot of people already know this. Most people already know this movie.
All right. Well, I know HBO Scandinavia accidentally leaked this movie 41 years ago, and a lot of people got spoiled. So no, I'm just kidding. All right. So we are going to skip then our normal spoiler-free section and jump straight into spoilers. Here we go. Our discussion of Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
It's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, okay. Jim, maybe you can do that little intro tagline and edit it in. 1, 2, 3, go.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
There you go.
Close Encounters of the Third
Kind. Was that Bane? Close Encounters, Batman of the Third Kind.
Are we gonna do the entire episode in impressions? Because we can. Like I'll do Christian Bale Batman. You could do Bane. Jim, do you want to be Catwoman? Hathaway Catwoman?
Sure.
Jim, do you have your cat ears for the broadcast?
Or I'll be Little Barry from Close Encounters.
I can't wait to watch this movie and talk about it with you guys.
Because you're Batman.
Anyway. Let's talk about Close Encounters.
Oh, goodness. We're punchy. Hey, Will, all right. I know it's been 40 years. I know this movie's been out. We talked about that. But why don't you just give us a brief setup just in case there's someone who hasn't seen it or maybe hasn't seen it recently. They need their memory jogged a little bit. And give us your thoughts. Again, spoilers are hot. Feel free. What was it like seeing this in 4K? Did it hold up? Go.
All right, so yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This was a 1977 movie directed by Steven Spielberg, and it stars Richard Dreyfuss as this guy, just sort of a regular blue-collar family man whose life gets upended when one day he's out and about, and he and some other people encounter a UFO, a live UFO. And this is right at the beginning of the movie, too. This isn't a film that's about are UFOs real or not. It's about this man who, upon discovering this, he finds himself drawn towards this mountain, towards this one particular vision that he keeps seeing in his brain over and over and over again. And we see that the impact this has on his family, and spoilers on the table, it's not very good. They're not happy with their father wrecking their house and building random statues and just not being connected to them. It also stars Terry Garr, who plays this woman named Ronnie, who also sees the UFOs, also has the same pull towards this mountain range, and at the same time is distraught over the fact that her young son has been abducted by aliens. So the two of them end up finding themselves on this path towards this town the military have taken over. And you find out that the reason they've done that is they know that this is the place where the aliens are going to show up, and they've developed this language, this communication to interact with them, this 5-note tune, the one that Jim did for us earlier. And yeah, we're in spoilers. I'll keep going. With the as the aliens make contact with the human beings, we have this sort of nice interaction where the abductees from past and present days are returned, including the young boy, and mankind has this connection with this race that we didn't have before. And I think there's a few things to really tackle in terms of why this film is both really good, because yes, it's incredibly good, but also why it's incredibly important. This film marks a really interesting spot in Spielberg's career. Right before this film, like the film that he put out, 1975, the film that was released before Close Encounters was Jaws, which is the film that most people would say invented the modern blockbuster. And if that's the case, I think Close Encounters of the Third Kind is one of the last films for a long time of science fiction films that lacked cynicism. I think that we ended up in a long stretch after this film where a lot of our sci-fi was more based around outsiders as a threat, outsiders as a concern. And I think that, I mean, if I'm doing really bold strokes here, I can say that that same xenophobia applies to a lot of things kind of going on in modern politics, modern way of living, just this fear of the outsider invading what we believe to be true and what we believe to be safe. And so I think that's why a film like this is important to be re-released, because I think it lets us see the outsider as someone that we can build a kinship with, that we can connect with on a way that isn't out of a place of fear. And we've seen some films come out that have sort of bridged this same gap recently. I think things like Interstellar and Arrival both share some of the DNA that made Close Encounters of the Third Kind work. As far as Spielberg's films, while it's maybe not my favorite of his films, I mean, I think Jaws is in that conversation. I think Jaws is probably the winner of that for me. I think this is probably his most spectacular film. And by that, I mean, he fills all of the shots with this awe, this wonder. I think a lot of times when we see science fiction nowadays, when we see aliens, there's this blasé feeling to it, to the aliens reveal. Whereas with this film, every time the characters look up to the sky, it's in wonder and it's in awe and it's in shock and it's in this like splendor that there is something out there. This is a film that doesn't take for granted the fact that aliens exist. It lets us be excited by that. So I think this film is one that is really important to watch. I think it's really solid. I think that it isn't a perfect film. That's why I think he has a few stronger films. There are, if I'm being really critical, there are some pacing issues through it, just where it takes a little, like once we know where we're going, I think the film takes a little bit too long to sometimes get there, but that's really nitpicky. I love this movie. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean,
it's...
Go ahead, Brad.
No, go ahead, Jim.
You go.
No, No, please.
How about you both go at once, and then
How
Jim
about both?
separate it in editing?
How about both?
How about this? I'm gonna read a live comment from the chat, and then Jim, you can take over.
Go ahead.
Will, it's interesting that you mentioned the pacing issues because Edward Chambers in the chat says he watched this movie as a kid and he felt cheated by the slow burn. So, Will, it sounds like that slow burn kind of paid off for you. Maybe it didn't quite work for everybody.
Especially as an adult, I think that I feel like my threshold for that is probably better than it was when I was younger. So I think that that's a very fair comment. There are some very slow parts to this movie that I think could be very off-putting. But I do say that this is what, if it threw you off as a kid, it's worth a revisit because I think that while it does slow down at points, I think Richard Dreyfuss's performance, as well as Francois Truffaut, who I'll talk about in a bit, I think that it's just absolutely their performances, even in the slow parts, are always gripping to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get into my issues with the movie, which, I mean, there are some. You're right, Will. It's not a perfect movie, but I still respect this movie quite a bit. I was, what year did this come out? Like 77?
77.
77? So
it was here's what'll help. It was 40 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, so when I was a teenager watching this movie, it kind of blew me away when it came out. I saw this movie several times in the movie theater. And to me, it's still a spectacle. And the same parts in this movie still give me goosebumps. And there are parts at the beginning of the movie that give me goosebumps. There's a scene in the desert at the very beginning of the movie that is like, oh my God, what just happened? And when you realize what the movie kind of spells it out for you, but when right before they spell it out, you're realizing, oh my God, these are the planes that disappeared in the Bermuda. Bermuda Triangle was a huge thing when at the time I was growing up. It was one of those. We had these shows on TV like In Search Of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
And they did all these things, and to have that incorporated into this like major motion picture as a surprise was really great. The first encounters with both Dreyfuss's first encounter, or Roy McNeely or whatever his name was, his first encounter with the alien craft when all alone in the truck on a deserted country road was so awesome to watch. And then the people kind of out at the side. So many scenes like in this movie. Of course, the end, right? This movie all builds up to the end. I think it does have pacing problems in the middle when he's trying to put all the pieces together. I think they come together a little bit too slowly. And I couldn't figure out if it's just pacing issues or it's because, hey, I know where the good stuff is and I want to get to it. So let's skip by all this shit that I already know. And Richard Dreyfuss is great and all, but like, come on. And that may be part of it. It didn't seem to bother me as much. Actually, I'm kind of opposite of some of Edward online. Like I was a little more bothered by the pacing problems now in the second act than I was when I was younger. It's weird how that works. Also, I'm looking at this from a different lens. Back then, I wasn't married. I didn't have a family. I didn't have children. I think it's a little bit different looking at it now from the perspective of somebody who's a parent, mostly because of the Barry and his mother storyline, but also the Roy character and his family, how he totally like has tunnel vision for this vision that he has, and his family totally falls to the wayside. They not by lack of trying on their part, but it becomes kind of weird at the end, and he basically leaves them abandoned at the end of the movie without any mention of his family after about 2/3 of the way through. It's kind of strange. So there are daddy issues in this movie, and it's interesting to look back on those from a different lens now. I guess I would say that I still really love this movie. It holds a special place in my heart. I don't know if it's my favorite movie of his. A lot of people think it's his masterpiece, and he's done a lot of great films. But yeah, I mean, That the whole third act, I think, is spectacular. That whole alien greeting. And Will, I want to mention. I want to emphasize something you did, and this kind of flips the whole xenophobia thing on its head. This movie doesn't really have a xenophobic bone in its body. From the very first scene of alien encounter, these people are out welcoming contact with these beings or aliens. They're on the side of the road, standing in their pickup truck bed, waiting for these things to come by so they can say hi or just have a contact with them. Same thing at the end of the movie. We have a whole scientific community and paramilitary community coming out to greet these creatures, right? I don't remember seeing any. There are no weapons in this landing pad area that I saw. It was all scientific equipment. So yeah, it flips. It kind of is the opposite of xenophobic, and that's really cool for a movie 40 years old to be showing us that today.
Yeah, especially in light of news out just today about things going on in the United States. And we won't dive very deeply into that at all, because that would be a dark hole we could never recover from.
That's on our other podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Jim, I definitely know what you mean. And it is nice to see. One of the things I loved about the original Star Trek was that, you know, it was enthusiastic about embracing other cultures and bringing everyone together. And, you know, aliens, yeah, they're new and they're interesting, but like you don't get the sense that they're always like bad guys, right? Star Trek is all about like scientific discovery. And so I feel like, you know, Star Trek definitely had some influences on this film. And, you know, as sci-fi films go about alien contact, this one's right up there with, speaking of Contact with Jodie Foster for me, as one of two of my three all-time favorite sci-fi films. I've probably seen Close Encounters, I don't know, 40 times over the course of my life, but I haven't seen it within the last 10 years. So it was really interesting to go see this movie in theaters, for one, because I'd never seen it in a theater before, but also, two, seeing it through the lens of like, you know, I feel like now that we've been doing this podcast for a number of years, maybe I have a bit more of a critical eye when it comes to movies and how I think about movies. And so, you know, I'm sort of analyzing as I'm watching the movie, and the pacing issues that Edward called out, I see them. I was getting sleepy in the middle of the film, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, here's 6 minutes we didn't need. All right, here's 7.5 minutes we didn't need.
Go get some more chicken wire, Roy.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, overall, I think it still stands up. One thing we haven't really talked about much, and I guess I'll take it so I'm not repeating you guys, is just how great this looked in 4K and projected on the big screen. I was absolutely blown away. Like I said, I've seen this movie so many times on TV, even like, you know, on a Blu-ray that came out a few years ago. Like when they were promoting it, they had some stills and stuff from that Blu-ray, and it looked good, you know, but not like this. This is pretty phenomenal to see. Also, some things that I didn't even catch came to mind this time around. Because my dad and my sister were in town for the weekend visiting with us, and my dad's name is Roy. So as we're watching the movie, I'm like, oh, right, the main character, his name is Roy. And then he's talking to his son, Brad, and somehow, seeing this movie 40 times, I never caught that the kid's name was Brad. And then to top it off, they're talking to their neighbor, whose name is Mrs. Harris, which I thought was kind of crazy.
Oh, okay. I wonder, one, if there was some sort of link in terms of like how Brad got his name, or B, if this is the science fiction movie. Maybe you came into our plane of existence because of this film. The two of you are tied together in some weird, inexplicable way. I want to write this. I need a treatment for this exact film, Close Encounters of the Brad Kind.
Oh gosh, that would be crazy. But yeah, it was just sort of weird. I think it was because my dad was here and I started thinking about it. And also too, I remember watching this movie many times with my dad when I was a kid. So it was a real treat to be able to see it with dad and my sister but also with my husband Jim now here with us. And Jim and my dad are sort of in the same age group, which I appreciate. And so it was kind of awesome to see Jim. We're going to talk about you like you're not here for a second. It was awesome to see Jim and my dad like geeking out over this movie and kind of comparing their original experiences seeing it versus like seeing it with me in a theater. So I really just want to appreciate the powers that be. I know earlier I kind of made fun like it was a cash grab. Really, we're putting Close Encounters out in theaters again. But it was kind of amazing to be able to experience sort of this like multi-generational film at two very different points in my life with some of the players from the past, some of the players of the present, and bringing it all together. So Jim, thanks so much for helping to make that happen. That was awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. And your point about this being maybe influenced by the storylines of Star Trek and kind of that inclusion thread that runs through. I can definitely see that. Older movies like that Spielberg may have been influenced by, and I don't know this, but like The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? With where you have this alien spaceship landing on Earth, and it's a big unknown, and people are freaking out, and what's going to happen? And then the alien comes out and has this message for mankind. You can kind of see that connective tissue between really old some really old science fiction movies, because a lot of those movies were, like let's kill the monster aliens. But some of them had a very intelligent thread running through them, and that's what this movie had. And the same thing, Will brought it up. I kept thinking of the movie Arrival in this movie a lot. Like it would be like in the back of my mind, like, oh yeah, this is like really so much like Arrival. Instead of the 5 tones or the tones, you have the
coffee cup stains,
the coffee cup stain symbols that were being, that were communicated by. What more can we say about this movie other than, loved it. I loved the way it looked. It still maintained its filmic quality. It wasn't cleaned up to the point where it looked like a digital recreation. It still had its filmic quality, but it was clear, crisp, and the sound was great when we saw it. So I'm just happy to have seen this. Was the first time you guys saw this, since you guys are kind of around the same generation? It's the first time you saw this on VHS?
Yes,
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So it had to be a much different experience to see it in a movie theater.
I agree. Absolutely. I totally thought you were going to jump in there. I was reading your facial expression, so I was like, I don't want to interrupt him.
No. We
could talk about porgs if you want. I mean,
No, I will say, like, one of the things, I haven't gotten a chance to go see the restoration of it yet. So my screening. Yeah, so I still haven't seen it in theater. So I do envy that.
Okay.
I've seen it on VHS. And I've seen it on Blu-ray, and I've seen it on today I saw it on Amazon VOD. But I haven't seen it on the big screen. But there is a grandeur to the effects in this film. Everything is very, when you are seeing the spaceships, they're massive, and they don't feel like these CGI blobs or these like video game cutscenes. They look like it looks like this giant. I keep thinking every time it's like this giant, like, inverted cityscape as this ship. And I think that there's something so grand and so large and so, again, I used this before, but awe-inspiring about that design. So, no, I haven't seen it on the big screen. I'm guessing, and Brad, maybe I'll ask you that question. Does it blow your top when you see that, like, that shot of the mothership?
It really does, and part of it too, I think, from a visual effects standpoint, I mean, Jim, you nailed it on the head. I mean, they remastered some things here, they cleaned some things up, but it still has sort of that film grainy quality to it, which I think actually masks some of the potential issues with the special effects in the film. And so, I'm glad that they resisted the urge to like kind of remove some of that and maybe overlay some more CGI from a newer perspective. but sort of combining that with like the incredible sound that modern day movie theaters have. I mean, when that mothership like comes down and plays, like, you know, they do that, it goes like the Pacific Rim, like just like the lights on the chip and things shaking and the sound like vibrating my teeth. That made me feel like I was on that mesa of Devil's Tower, like under that ship, like looking up at it. Which, I mean, I don't know. It was amazing. I've never experienced Close Encounters in such an immersive way before. It's always been from like across the living room on a smaller TV. So, Will, I would definitely say, I mean, if you get an opportunity to see this while it's in theaters and available, I mean, I would be curious to know if it changes the way you think about this movie.
I don't know. Is it only a 1 week engagement?
I think so.
I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be limited. It's gonna be tough, but
it'll make it back around here before long. We have you guys have been to the Paramount during South by. During non-festival season, they do a lot of retrospectives, just retrospective films, especially over the summer. So I wouldn't be surprised if that restoration makes it back into the rotation.
Yeah.
You know, a year or two with Paramount.
Brad, you mentioned some things that the restoration brought out. One of the things that stood out to me was near the end of the film when all the aliens are coming out, and they're obviously small children, you know, dressed up in suits. You can kind of see some of the kind of, you could tell they're like kids in little like spandex, gray spandex suits. You could kind of see some like wrinkles and stuff that start to pop out that I never saw before, like either in the original film projection, 35 millimeter film projection, or certainly on VHS. Also the eyes, like I know they're backlit like tremendously by the light coming out of the giant hatch door of the spaceship. But at some points when they're all milling together, you can actually see these giant eyes that they have, which look amazing. I'm like, oh my God, I never saw that before. That's awesome. You know, they don't have little slits for eyes. They have these big, like humanish kind of eyes, exaggerated eyes, which I thought was fantastic. But yeah, I loved the way this film looked and sounded. I'm glad we got to see it this way.
There's just a little bit of, I don't know if trivia is the right word for it, but just like a piece that I absolutely appreciate and have been sort of drawing a lot of like parallels to, and that's the casting of Francois Truffaut in the role of the I forget the character's name, the Lacombe, Claude Lacombe, you know, the guy that's sort of like the head of the communications. He's the one that has the interactions with Dreyfus there at the end. His claim to fame outside of being in this movie, and I think he was quite good in this movie. I think he showed from the institutional side of everything, which is usually where all of the hard asses and the military men and everything. Like, this was a character who got it, who understood like the pull that Roy and Ronnie had towards where they're at and empathized with it. He's also he was one of the founders of the French New Wave era of film, which is as far as directions go, the reason we watch films today the way that we watch them, with the story elements, even like, the way they cut films, the way they edited them, etc., is due in part very heavily to what these directors did. And so seeing him show up there in this film about communication and about language, because that's I think what I think there's a big part of what Close Encounters is about. It's about language and communication and about that empathy, and seeing this particular director in that spot, like, that was not a coincidence. Like, Spielberg definitely had something to say with getting this particular guy to be in that particular role, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's been in other films before as an actor, right? Truffaut has.
Yes, he has. Yeah, I mean, even
Yeah.
a lot of his own films, he did a lot of acting too.
Right. I got concerned there for a moment because I looked up his acting credits, and the one at the top says The Green Room, and I'm like, wait a minute,
No.
and it's not that one, not that Green Room.
This was one of his last movies to act in. I think he only had a couple after this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it was good. It was good to see him in this movie. And at one point at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene with the air traffic controllers, and Brad and I are going back and forth. Like, is that a young Morgan Freeman? I can't tell if that's Morgan Freeman or not. Apparently, it's not. But
well, it was really confusing because he's like got his microphone and he's like, "Sector 31, get busy flying or get busy dying."
Well, it definitely his speech inflection sounded a lot like him, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm trying to remember what he was doing back then, but I don't know. It looked like him, and then I'm trying to, Terry Garr has been in some movies that I've liked as well, like her a lot. Trying to remember who else was in this that we'd know from other films that made appearances. I'm always looking in some of these older films for actors that like weren't really known yet, but like boom, they're in this movie.
Well, Lance Henriksen was in this film.
Yes, he was.
Yep.
And who's he? Help me out.
Oh gosh, he's been in a ton of things.
Like what? He was Bishop in Aliens. That's one of the
from
the bigger ones. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha.
Yep. He was in The Terminator. He was the lead for a show called Millennium back in the 90s, I think.
Oh, holy crap!
Yep. Do you remember that show, Will?
Yes, but like, I'll be honest. Like, until you mentioned it right now, I forgot that show existed. And as soon as you said Millennium, just like a rush of just episodes and plot elements just like flooded my brain. Oh my god, I may have to go watch some Millennium soon.
There you go. It was a good show. Canceled before its time, unfortunately, but definitely good to see a young Lance Henriksen in this film for sure.
I always thought this movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, would maybe lend itself to some kind of sequel. The way the ending, I mean, it's a perfect movie the way it is. Don't get me wrong, but the way put on your studio cap for a minute and like, there's certainly a good leaping off point for some other kind of story here. He left his family story undone. The whole, like, we totally wanted to know more about these aliens. I don't think it would have been as in the same tone as kind of like the transcendental experience that this movie was. Maybe, maybe that's why they couldn't make a sequel, because they wanted to keep it in that tone. But I'm like, all right, where's this? And it's weird. It's because now when you see a movie and it ends like that, you're like, they're definitely going to have a sequel to that movie.
Well, I think part of... Oh, go ahead, Brad.
No, please, go for it, Will.
I was going to say, I think part of the reason why you wouldn't see a sequel out of this one... Well, there's a few reasons. This was very much a passion project for Spielberg. Like, and he's had a few of those. Like, he's not the type of guy who's only had the one passion project, but he wrote, he directed. This was definitely kind of one of his babies that he wanted to see through to fruition. So if he didn't take up the mantle of it, especially with this being a 1977 film and not a 2017 film, I think that, if he didn't want to do a sequel, I don't think there would be a sequel. Nowadays, like, the studio would be like, well, I'm going to do one anyway. But then too, you run into some other tricky things. If you tried to do this story, let's say 5-10 years later, he's like, man, I want to revisit this world. They've already kind of established this whole, when you're abducted, you don't age thing. And unfortunately, Richard Dreyfuss does not have that same superhuman ability. So then you have to deal with, like, okay, well, how do we young him up? Dealing with, like, 80s technology. And nowadays, what do? Do we CGI him? Whatever. So I think that this is the type of story that some of those elements kind of work against there being a sequel. And I'm very okay with that. I feel like this film ends on such a positive, kind of hopeful, optimistic note that it doesn't need any more story.
I mean, I agree with you, but I think, you could do some magic plot hand waving to make it work. Like maybe the aliens dropped him off on another planet, so he wasn't in suspended animation anymore, and he aged, and they came back and picked him up and brought him back to Earth, and he's there to warn the humans of something that's coming, and then we get Independence Day 2, and I would not like to see that happen. But all that to say, never put it past the studios to pass up or pass up a potential cash grab, because obviously re-releasing this film in 4K is great. Let's celebrate the anniversary, but you can damn sure bet if there's an angle to make more money from this, there's probably conversations going on in some levels.
One of the things that I thought was I did want to know more about after the film ended. And first of all, Jim, I think you were right what you said earlier. I was thrown off a little bit by the fact that he's just like, "See ya, suckers," to his kids, and that was it. That was a weird note. But I was also very interested in like what it must be like for these people who have been gone from Earth for so long to suddenly show back up, and some time has passed, and we've seen that in shows like the 4400 and in Captain America. We've seen stories like that, right?
Star Trek.
So I think that these are all things that we've seen, but I wanted to see it with specifically these characters in this world, because this is a world that very closely mirrors ours. It's not a fantastical sci-fi version of it. It's just our world plus aliens. So if you want to do a sequel, what about this? What about the kid who got abducted, Barry, and now he's like a 45-year-old man who's starting to have these dreams about this mountain, and he's sort of reliving some of the things that he experienced when he encountered the aliens. I don't know. That's a way that you could get, like, maybe take the Dreyfus stuff and put it away and just focus on the alien abduction and kind of life after. So
he couldn't eat any mashed potatoes, but unless they were shaped like Devil's Tower. Or here's an idea: you kind of have a sequel and tie it together with Arrival by having Richard Dreyfuss, right? Old Richard Dreyfuss come back modern day in an alien ship, and he's now got, he's enlightened, he's got all this knowledge, and he's connecting with his family that he abandoned years ago, and so many storylines there.
And we come to realize that the whole music communication thing ended up not working. And so he taught them to communicate using coffee cup stains.
Right.
Wait.
What about, you could tie in Mr. Holland's opus?
That's what I was going to go with. Yes. Go for that, Jim. I like that.
Yeah, I think we could definitely, with the tones and everything. Oh, yeah. Tie this whole universe together.
And 1 and 2 and boo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
It's a Dreyfuss verse.
Are all Dreyfuss films related? I mean, what else do we have there? I mean, Jaws. I mean, that's just a Spielberg away. I'm very okay with that leak. What else? What else do we have from him?
This could be the new launch of the Dreyfuss Renaissance.
Well, American Graffiti is obviously a prequel to Close Encounters, right?
Okay.
When he was a teenager, right?
There you go. See?
Right.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
It could be.
Oh,
getting punchy.
All right. We are getting even more punchy than we were at the beginning of this discussion, which tells me it is probably time to move on to some plugs. How do you guys feel about that?
I'm down.
Do it.
Before we get to Krippendorf's tribe, let's go.
Wow.
Another film about xenophobia and the
right.
There we go. There's a connection.
How about that? All right, we're going to officially move on into some plugs as we look to wrap up for this week. Hey, I just want to give a quick plug for the new remake version reboot? Question mark? I don't even know what term you use anymore. Of Stephen King's It is out in theaters this weekend. Very excited to see this. I loved the miniseries as a kid. Will, I wanted to ask you specifically 2 questions. 1, you've seen the miniseries, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I thought so. So 2, Jim was asking about this over the weekend. Should he watch the Tim Curry miniseries before we see the new movie or after?
I think I think before. I mean, I know you and I have both seen it, Brad, and I think that I'm maybe even a little more excited about the movie because I have this foundation to draw on, from the book and from the miniseries. As long as you go into it knowing this was a Stephen King television miniseries, and a lot of those, there have been a lot of Stephen King television miniseries, and a lot of them have been really rough around the edges, like really rough. This one just is not exempt from some of that. It's just got some really amazing things within it that counterbalance some of the cringy things. So I really enjoy it, even if it's not great. Does that make sense, Brad?
Yeah, it definitely does. I'm curious though if seeing the Tim Curry TV miniseries version might in any way hamper Jim's ability to appreciate the new one. I almost wonder if we want a new perspective.
That's fair.
Here's my thought. Both of you have seen the TV miniseries version before going into this movie, so you have that perspective on the new movie. How about I see the miniseries after I see the movie, and that way I can come at it from like the total 180-degree side of that.
I'm very good with that.
Yeah,
I like that idea. Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right.
So it'll be a lot of it this weekend, Jim, because we'll see the movie.
If I get to it.
So we'll watch the first half of the miniseries because that deals with the storyline of when they were kids, which is also what this first movie is addressing.
Okay. They only have
the sequel is going to do the second half of the series, yeah.
And it's expanding on that a little bit too, pulling on more elements from the book, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
I could tell because you yelled.
I did. Sorry, listeners, if that got loud in your ear. Maybe Jim will lower it in post-production.
Amplification.
In any event, it is out. It is out this weekend in theaters. Check it out and come on back for our review next week. Jim, what have you got this week?
Well, I don't remember if you mentioned this in a plug before or not. But I'm going to plug a movie that I finally caught up with on Netflix. So it's available for anybody who has a Netflix account or access to a friend's Netflix account, which again, I would never promote. But it's a documentary called Icarus. And it is a documentary by this guy, Brian Fogel, who's he's an athlete. He's a bicyclist, like a world-class amateur bicyclist. He's not a professional, but he's like top of the amateur food chain. And he sets out to uncover the truth about doping in sports, specifically with regard to elite class bike racing, kind of like Tour de France stuff, like, that whole Lance Armstrong thing that went down when he was accused of doping and denied it. And then all of a sudden people came forward and it was true that he had tricked the system. So this guy wanted to try to do that, and he tried to do it under a Russian scientist's care. And then the movie goes from that, which sounds pretty interesting. It gets much more serious and turns into this seriously geopolitical thriller kind of stuff, where I don't want to give anything away, but it's kind of like Edward Snowden level things. What was that documentary called that we saw where, this movie starts out as one thing, and then the act of making the movie turns out as totally something way bigger than that.
Like Citizen 4?
Yeah, Citizen 4. That was it. This movie's really good, and it's really interesting. It's on Netflix, as I said. Unknown filmmaker Brian Fogel, who made it, the bicyclist guy, actually made the movie. And some interesting characters. And if you're at all into water sports, this is a cool movie too, because there's a lot of urine testing going on in this movie.
Wow.
I am not. I'm just saying, if you're into that, there's a lot of pee in this movie. So that's a bonus for some. I'm trying to get people to watch the movie. Any angle I can.
Wow.
If you're not into bicycling, geopolitical intrigue, good documentary filmmaking, there's always a water sports angle.
just be sure to flag your yellow hanky as you watch the movie.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Just put it in the right back pocket, or you could be in for a nasty surprise.
Yeah. Anyway, it's called Icarus, and it's a really good documentary.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Jim. Will, what have you got?
Is this how I've got to angle plugs now? Do I have to say, like, I've got a real hard on for this next pick?
Like, got to be some fetish involved.
So the actual thing is this my plug is sort of weird because I'm in this weird spot right now, schedule wise. Most of the movies that I've seen recently can't talk about yet. I've got a film festival coming up in 2 days, a 4-day one. Sorry, AGLIF, Austin Gay and Lesbian International Film Festival. So I've been sort of ramping up for it. But what I can talk about is I've been playing the hell out of Persona 5. It's a video game. It's a fun one, though. It's a RPG about these Japanese high school kids who by day they have to like take exams and build up their skills and build up their confidant ranks with each other through friendship and hanging out and stuff. And by night they go into another universe and they fight demons. And it's really fun. It's over the top. It's weird. It's also dark, surprisingly dark, and tackles some pretty heavy topics. It's a few months old, but just as I'm ramping up to AGLIF and then Fantastic Fest in 2 weeks with you guys, I thought I would dive into a video game that I've been meaning to get to just to sort of clean my palate before I'm just inundated with movie after movie after movie. So Persona 5, it's 4 months too late, but it's a lot of fun.
Sounds like there's plenty of room there for it to become a movie sometime down the road.
Oh, I would watch the hell out of that movie.
Yeah. And we know how great video games turn to movies do.
True story. There's never been a bad video game film adaptation.
True story, my ass.
True story. There's never been a bad one.
Oh boy. Wow. All right. Well, guys, as we wrap up here, let our listeners know where they can find you guys if they want to chat movies online. Jim?
Find me on Twitter, guys. I am at JJP Out West, all one word, JJP Out West. You could tweet me, at me, follow me, direct message me, anything you want. But find me on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook too, at under my real name, Jim Pugliafico.
Don't miss your chance, guys, because Jim's got a really sexy ad.
Right. Did I say Twitter or I meant Facebook? Find me on Facebook. Yeah, Jim Pugliafico.
Nice ad, Jim.
I was making a really
poor
ass joke. Sorry. Ad joke fail. Will, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me on Twitter at whatever cove. You can find me on Facebook, William Lindis. Just send me a message so I know that you're a real human being and not a bot. I'm on Letterboxd, which is a site for cataloging and reviewing films. Just look for me as William Lindis there. Add me. No water sports in any of those 3 platforms, so I don't know if it's as attractive as Jim's plug, but I think there's still something worthwhile there.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Oh, goodness. Will, I'm going to listen to Yellow by Coldplay after the podcast.
That is, I mean, honestly, is there a way to work that into our outro now?
It was all yellow after Jim's plug. Hey, guys, you can find me on Twitter. You can see my handle on the screen right now. But for those of you who are listening on digital tape delay, find me on Twitter at iBradPro. You can also message me on Facebook, Brad Harris. I'm the Brad Harris that is not the gun-toting religious nut, and probably has Bear and Chub friends in common with you. So feel free to add me. Although, like Will said, please send me a message first. Guys, true story. Someone added me because of the podcast, I guess, like 2 months ago, and I never replied. And then I was going back through messages, and I saw it in like the other inbox. And then the guy was like, "Oh, you didn't message me for 2 months. Fuck you." And so I feel kind of bad, but like, you know, I had no idea.
Some people are just
I'm sorry. He friend requested me he didn't message me originally, and then he sent me a message and was like, fuck you. So anyway, please send that message. Let me know it's you and not just some random robot person that I don't know. And we'll all live happily ever after is the hope. And want to give a quick shout out to those of you who joined us in the live chat tonight. Sam from Denver, glad to have you with us. We'll see you in 36 hours. Very excited. Mm-hmm. Edward Chambers, thanks for being with us. And Bobby Miller. Hey, Bobby, coming in toward the end of the show. Glad to have you guys with us, as always.
Where's my fucking Blu-ray? That's what he's saying.
I was just messaging him and letting him know we're getting those out. But also a big shout out to those of you who are listening on digital tape delay, either through iTunes or Stitcher Radio. We really appreciate you guys. If you could do us one favor. We don't ask a lot on the Movie Bears podcast. We don't even charge for the Movie Bears podcast. We haven't even done a fundraiser for the Movie Bears podcast yet. Maybe someday. I don't know. But if you love the show, if you like listening to us every week, we would love your help in helping other bears and chubs and admirers and allies and friends to find the show. So if you can take a few moments to rate us in iTunes, that would be supremely helpful. Or if you see our post advertising the episode of the week on Facebook or something, feel free to hit that share button if you don't mind. We would love your help in reaching a broader audience. New people are finding the show all the time, a lot in part to you guys. So thank you for that. We appreciate it greatly. I'm done with my ask. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll see you next week for it. Goodbye. We love you guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.